Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, everyone, welcome to the very first episode of This Week in Wrestling History for 2019.
Woo! We made it into a new year.
Yay! Thanks for sticking with us while we took a little bit of a short break there for the holiday season, and while I got over being really sick.
Yeah, and I just didn't want to do it during the holidays.
Yeah, it was kind of rough timing there, but we feel nice and refreshed now and got some historic stuff to talk about.
We have quite a bit to talk about this time around.
Yeah, so this week what we're actually going to talk about, so we're recording on Wednesday, January 9th, 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and something historic actually happened this week in wrestling.
This week, midnight on January 1st.
Yeah, I'm going to say
kinda
this
thing.
week.
Do you want to do it or should I do it?
Yeah, it's your darling, so you can go ahead and do this one.
So, Cody, the Young Bucks, Brandy, and I would assume Hangman's involved in Hangman Page's
Yeah,
One of
it's
the-
fair to
the-
say that.
announced All Elite Wrestling this week. AEW, which essentially is their own promotion that they're starting.
So let's not go too far into that right this second. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to look at that historic event, and we're also going to kind of actually take a look at the future of, we're going to make some predictions for what's going to happen this year in wrestling for, I'd say at least 3 or 4 of the major companies that are currently in existence right now.
Yeah, we'll talk about Impact, ROH, AEW, WWE. We might talk about the Rumble.
Yeah, might touch on New Japan a little bit here and there.
Yep. I feel like though we should start off with kind of the other big thing that happened this week and
Yeah.
start with the somber news.
Unfortunate. So was it last week that it happened?
Yes, it was last
So
week.
yeah, last week Mean Gene Okerlund passed away, age of, he was just in his 70s, right? Late 70s?
76, I believe.
I thought it was 78, but yeah. Either way, late 70s, so still fairly early, and unfortunately, from what I've read, it was kind of similar to the circumstances of Jim Neidhart passing away.
Yeah, it from what I read was he took he had some health issues, took a nasty fall,
Right.
went to a nursing home, and everything just kind of spiraled downhill within a couple of days.
Yeah, it was so similar to Neidhart, where he had a bad fall, and then things just, unfortunately, got severely worse very quickly.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, that happens with older guys. Well, older people, not necessarily
mean-
guys.
it happens with anybody really.
Yeah, unfortunately, things like that can cascade very quickly like that. You're okay. You have a quote-unquote minor or even not major, like you expect the accident in and of itself to be fatal, but
Everything that comes after that
yeah.
causes issues, and yeah,
I mean, I'm not terribly old, but even my body has issues bouncing back from things as easily as they did a decade ago. So.
Right.
Yeah, all the best to his family. I'm not a huge Hulk Hogan fan, but I hear the tribute he paid on Monday Night Raw was very nice and appropriate. So
his tribute was good. The video package that they played during Monday Night Raw was what made it. I mean, Mean Gene was essentially the voice of a generation.
right, so growing up, he was kind of that guy backstage. He had a weird role. He was a backstage interviewer more than a commentator. He wasn't an announcer by any means.
Right. But he was still
Yeah,
that guy.
he was the one that led the interviews, kind of the role where, like, the more wrestler-based talk shows like Miz TV or Jericho Show or The Cutting Edge.
Right.
Yeah, those were all more filled by one guy, Mean Gene Okerlund, and as well as some of these segments where they would have him in the control room and talking about upcoming events or
Or even
hotline stuff.
when he was out in the ring and actually doing post-match, pre-match, or in between segments, interviews that you would see like Renee Young doing now, or Charlie
Right.
Caruso doing something like that now.
Yeah, exactly. So he very much was that guy in the 80s, early 90s WWE, WWF. And then when he made the jump over to WCW, very similar role there. got into a very weird kind of area after the NWO came around.
Yeah.
And then especially once Vince Russo came in and we kind of had like dirty old man Mean Gene. That was a little awkward. And
Well, the stuff with Mean Gene and Bobby the Brain Heenan was some of the best.
oh yeah, I mean, well, anything with Bobby was great, but yeah,
But then you take
the two
Mean
of those
Gene.
did interact very well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the downer note that we kind of wanted to at least touch on that and acknowledge him for everything that he did do for the business.
Now moving on to a little less somber note.
So how do we want to go about this? Where do you want to start with our kind of look forward instead of our look backs?
I think we should talk about AEW and kind of do this is what they talked about during the rally, which we'll talk a little more about, and then kind of hit the future and their relation to the other companies.
That sounds good because I think the ROH stuff and the Impact stuff will kind of tie into AEW.
Yeah. So, like we said, AEW was announced at midnight, January 1st. If you follow Being the Elite on YouTube, they had their countdown clocks on their phones.
Yeah, that had been going on for months. So obviously this is something that had been in the planning stages, and there had been kind of hints dropped on the internet, or at least information discovered by certain trademarks and
Little rumblings here and there, but still
Yeah.
nobody was 100% sure what was going on. So,
right. No one really knew what this thing was going to be, and to be fair, we still don't fully know what it's going to be, but we're getting a better picture.
Yeah. So we flash forward to Tuesday, January 8th, and they have Cody, the Bucks, Hangman, Brandy. They all get together and they have they call it the Double or Nothing rally in Jacksonville.
Right. So besides announcing AEW, Double or Nothing, their next The Elite pay-per-view, the sequel to All In, was announced.
Right. So they have this rally, which just so happens to be 5 blocks away from where SmackDown is being held on Tuesday night. And they have this rally. It's essentially in the parking lot of the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium. And they start announcing stuff.
Right. So big things they announced was Double or Nothing would be happening May 25th in Vegas.
Yep. And kind of at a bigger arena in the MGM Grand. I mean, UFC holds events there
Right.
often.
Well, I mean, actually, I think it's going to be a little bit smaller than where they were in Chicago, because in Chicago it was 10,000. I don't know if the MGM Grand holds that many.
It's smaller than Chicago, but it has a bigger name
A
behind
little bit
it.
more cachet.
Yeah. So they announced that. Then they started going into, before they started announcing like roster, because that was kind of mixed in throughout the night.
So well, let's cover that first. So throughout the event, they kind of brought in some of their if you watch Being the Elite, you're going to have a good idea who some of these signees were going to be. First big one was SCU, SoCal Unlimited.
SoCal Uncensored.
Uncensored?
Yep.
All right. SoCal
SCU.
Uncensored.
SCU.
So they're now signed to AEW.
Which consists of Frankie Kazarian, Christopher Daniels, and Scorpio Sky. Then they also announced shortly after that was MJF, Maxwell Jacob Freeman, right?
I believe that's correct.
I haven't seen too much of him. The only thing I saw of him was at All In.
Exactly. That's the only thing I know about him. Seems like a good heel. We were discussing him earlier. I said he kind of felt like The Miz a bit, where he feels like one of the only genuine heels around. You disagreed slightly, but we're basically on the same page.
Yeah, to me, he seems like a Miz-style heel, but his promos had a lot, to me at least, had the feel of heel Piper in them a little bit. And I'll show you some at some point to...
Basically, he was a good talking heel that is decent enough in the ring.
Yeah. After that, they announced Joey Janela and Penelope Ford, which they had the match against Hangman at All In. And
Yep, he's known more for being a hardcore wrestler, but that's not his only shtick.
Right. He's been in CZW, I believe, for a while now.
Okay, well, that doesn't refute anything about the hardcore stuff.
Right. And then after that, we had the first of two big signings.
Yep. So Hangman came out and was talking about wanting to be the first ever AEW champion, which the only things we know about championships so far in AEW is there's going to be a men's championship and a women's championship at the very least.
Yep. They haven't said anything about tag. They haven't said anything about a mid-card title, which I would assume mid-card title probably not.
I would assume eventually, but not right off the bat. You
Right.
want to establish your championship, give that a little bit of room to grow. Then once that's kind of more firmly established, then you can kind of roll in a mid-card belt.
Maybe if they don't get a TV deal right away, and once they start showing up on TV, they end up having a TV title later on.
That would make sense.
So Hangman's talking about how he wants to be the first ever AEW champion because he's never held the world title before.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, out comes Pac, formerly known as Neville.
Yeah, so Pac shows up, and he's current Dragon Gate Open the Dream Gate champion.
Yep.
All right. Glad I got that right. There's a lot of titles in that company, and
And
they're
they-
all weird.
They all have really long names.
Yeah, they're all Open the Something Gate championships. So Pac walks out and gets in Hangman's face.
And essentially says, haha, I've held more titles than you even thought of, kid.
Yep. So it looks like we're going to have our first. He didn't really jump ship from WWE to AEW, but he's kind of the first real. He's the one that got away from WWE
Aside
besides
from
Cody.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's an interesting feud to start with. And I think if you're building off of two guys to carry your company, those two ain't bad ones.
That's a really good place to start. It's two guys that Pac is a bit more established than Hangman is, but they're both definitely on their way up. They both have a decent following, but are still a little bit unproven, I'm going to say.
I would say Hangman's a little more unproven than...
Totally fair. I mean, Neville did hold the NXT championship for a good bit.
Yeah, and probably the best... I would say he is what made 205 Live what it is now, easily.
I'm going to disagree, but not largely, so that's fine.
But like I said, if you're going to build off of two guys...
Right. It's a real good place to start with the company. So
I mean, you have Neville Pac, who is super athletic and plays a pretty mean heel.
yeah.
And then you have Hangman, he's a big dude.
Big dude, athletic dude. We saw him when we went to the ROH show doing
Hit it.
the shooting star off the apron.
Yeah. A guy that's 6'3" and like 260 shouldn't be able to do a shooting star press standing on the ring apron to the floor.
Yeah,
like
doing
that's not something that should happen.
Right. It's not something you at least don't expect to see that every day.
So, again, if you're going to start somewhere with two guys in your main title picture, you could be worse.
Pretty good place to start, especially for largely there's going to be a lot of quote unquote indie guys that are a part of AEW that
Right.
your casual WWE fan may or may not know. Hangman definitely kind of fits the standard WWE mold, and they know Neville.
Right.
So that's a good place to start.
So that leads us to the second big signing, which just so happens to be...
Chris Jericho.
Now, you want to talk about name recognition and somebody knowing, oh, I recognize that guy from WWE, or I know that name from somewhere. I mean, to be fair, my dad, who listens to this every now and then,
Hi, Dad.
doesn't know a lot about wrestling, knows who Chris Jericho is.
Yeah, Chris Jericho's great for name recognition. He has a lot of crossover between WWE, his band, now New Japan.
Yeah, and
He had his game show on NBC for a little while.
He did, and he's even got what was the other thing that he was doing? His podcast that he
Right.
does, which brings in people from wrestling, from music, from
Comedy.
comedy. I mean, he had a guy on there who was talking about conspiracy theories with him for a while.
I'm okay with those people not being brought in anywhere.
But if you want if you want some attention brought to your company, how many eyes do you want on it to start?
Fair enough.
So Jericho walks out and says he's, no pun intended, all in on All Elite Wrestling.
Yeah, he basically walked in and said, I don't care about the money. I've got enough money. I don't care about being famous. I'm already famous.
I'm here to do something different.
Yeah. So there's a lot of influential people in the business that want to see this thing succeed for being different, which let's get into why this thing's different a little bit.
Yeah, so one of the things that they brought up, which I'm still curious as to how they're going to do it. Cody said wins and losses are actually going to matter.
Right. That's a little bit odd. I don't want to dig into that too much, honestly, because it's wrestling. It's
right. Like it like you said, it's wrestling. It's kayfabe.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't.
We know
matter.
who's going to win it. So someone in that ring knows who's going to win and lose before it happens. So
right.
I'm thinking maybe what they mean is you're not going to see people just trading wins back and forth like has become kind of commonplace in WWE.
Yeah, or I was even thinking that they might have stolen the SmackDown top 10 idea where they have like a top 10 ranking thing, but it
could be.
It would be interesting to see how they do it.
Right. So at the very least, they definitely came out and acknowledged that there hopefully will not be a corporate guy that they try to shove down everyone's throats. If someone kind of organically gets themselves over via the internet, via just connecting with the crowd really well, they're not going to try to take advantage of that for the sake of their other guy that they want you to cheer or this other guy that they want you to boo.
Right. And case in point, Roman and literally anybody else on the roster.
Right. Like Finn Balor, there was a lot of momentum behind him at one point.
Seth. I mean, you have a lot of guys like that, but the fact that they acknowledged if you start cheering for somebody, that person is going to start doing better.
Right. So that was nice. Big thing that was interesting to me was when Brandy came out and Dr. Britt Baker.
Yeah, we completely forgot about her.
Yeah. They came out and announced that, yes, there would be a women's division and women would be paid the same as men.
Which is huge.
Right. That's definitely a change. They're going to be treated equally and seriously, which don't take that to mean that in WWE terms, say Sasha Banks is going to get paid the same as Brock Lesnar. That's not what that means. It doesn't mean every male wrestler and every female wrestler are all going to make flat equally the same amount. That's not what that means.
Right.
It means dependent upon your place on the card, dependent upon how good at your job of being a professional wrestler you are, you will get paid the same regardless of your gender.
Right. So, best example I could say is you take, let's say, AJ Styles right now, and you take Becky Lynch.
Great examples.
I mean, two easily of the hottest wrestlers in WWE. Both happen to be on SmackDown.
Both main eventing pay-per-views.
Trading back and forth main eventing SmackDown. You would think that Becky gets paid the same as AJ.
Can pretty much assure she does not.
No. I'm probably not far off saying she does not make half of what AJ makes.
I would presume probably not.
I could see how something like this would be very enticing for some people in WWE moving to AEW. AEW. That's going to mess me up at some point again, I know it.
You could just say All Elite if that helps.
Yeah. I could see how somebody jumping from one company to another would find that a little more enticing.
Right, and let's not forget, this isn't just another indie promotion starting up. This is backed by one of the owners of the Jacksonville Jaguars putting both owners of the Jacksonville Jaguars putting about $100 million at least into this venture. So there's money there for people.
Yeah, so Tony Khan is essentially the CEO of AEW. He's part owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's the son of Shad Khan, who is the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars and Fulham Football Club in England. Tony Khan invested $100 million of his own money into this. Shad Khan is investing his money into this as a quote-unquote financial backer.
Yeah, so this is a serious investment by serious sports figures.
Tony Khan has said he's been a wrestling fan since he was 7 years old.
Right, and you can go back and find him sending like house show results to Dave Meltzer back from like the 2000s or something, I believe.
Right. The guy's a legitimate fan.
Yeah, he's a fan, and it sounds like they're mostly going to be keeping their fingers out of the day-to-day operations.
That's what it seems like. From what I've read, from what Cody and Brandy and everybody are saying, is that they're going to be pretty much doing the booking.
Right, they kind of help run the business and producing the shows, by which I mean fronting the Capitol, helping secure locations.
Right.
As far as like, they're not going to be booking the shows though.
Right. That's going to be left up to the Bucks, to Cody,
to the talent.
Right. Which is probably the best way to do it.
I would agree.
And you even have Eric Bischoff, who on 83 Weeks was talking about how this is probably the biggest influx, not even probably, this is the biggest influx of money into the professional wrestling industry since Ted Turner.
Right. And you can see the difference it makes in a company when it's a single person or pair of people, I suppose in this case, interested and invested in this, as opposed to when it's more of a conglomeration that's going around looking for backing, like the
Right.
Carters were in TNA and Jeff Jarrett in TNA.
Or like Anthem is kind of
Mm.
still doing a little bit with
Right.
Impact.
And
I mean, you even have pictures of Shad. Did you see the pictures of him at the rally?
no, I did not.
Yeah. So Shad Khan, the father of Tony, was standing a little bit farther back, but had a big old AEW hat on with a big grin on his face, listening to SCU when they were doing their opening for the rally.
Nice.
Yeah. So
S-
it seems like it's something that they're genuinely interested in, if not even just to stick it to Vince McMahon, like you were saying with the Reddit post.
Yeah, so as someone on Reddit said, it's kind of funny that Vince McMahon, the owner of a wrestling company, decides to go and start himself the XFL. Meanwhile, the owner of an NFL company decides, I'm going to open up my own wrestling company.
Right. So little funny coincidences, I guess, but
So the other real main thing, at least business-wise, that's going to be really interesting about AEW is this isn't firm yet. It's kind of been covered slightly, but it's been said the Khans are going to cover medical costs, any medical costs incurred by their wrestlers.
which is huge.
So I don't know if this is going completely as far to say that they're going to offer medical benefits to their wrestlers, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how they're going to play that. But if you have somebody like, for instance, Joey Janela, just recently, I believe, tore his ACL,
I believe you're correct.
which is why he was kind of walking funny. I believe he had a brace on his knee while he was up on the stage at the rally. If the Khans are going to either offer health insurance or be like, go get the surgery you need, go get the rehab you need, we'll foot the bill for it. Like, come on.
Right. It's huge.
And for those of you that don't know, that's not a thing for wrestlers.
Right. So currently all WWE performers are classified as independent contractors, meaning they're basically handed a lump sum of money by the WWE as a quote-unquote paycheck, or more in compensation for doing their work. WWE performers need to deal with filing their own taxes, setting aside any money for taxes necessary. Maybe WWE can do that for them. It really depends on how that whole thing is structured.
They
I'm not
probably
sure.
have some kind of
But-
service.
Right. They don't get health insurance. They don't have a set amount taken out of their paycheck by their employer and covered. Like, your normal workers or
Right. Your normal blue collar
right.
people. The wrestlers for WWE don't even pay for, or they pay for their own flights. They pay for their own hotels. They pay for their cars. Like the wrestling industry is very, I guess you would say, not user friendly.
Right. It's very weird that you have to be able to afford a certain amount of things before you can really get big in wrestling because, okay, you're a little local independent wrestler. There's a big show going on in another state that you can probably get booked on that will make you a lot of money. Can you afford to get there? Can you afford to stay there once you're there?
Right. I mean, even if you think about the independent guys that we have around here, you have Sean Carr, for instance, who, when we were going to IWF in Brockport, would drive from Binghamton to Brockport, which, for those of you that don't know, that's probably a 3 hour?
About a 3-hour drive.
3 hour drive, wrestle until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then either find some place to stay in Rochester or drive back immediately.
Right. And I don't know about you, but the thing I want to do immediately after a really big, strenuous activity is jump back in the car and drive for a few hours.
Yeah, that's the last thing I want to do.
I would say, especially if he's being expected by the people that run the promotion to attend the after party, which they used to have.
Right. So let's say he does go to that. Now he's not leaving until 1 a.m.,
Yeah.
2 a.m.
Let's say midnight, 1, 2. Exactly.
Or you have guys like Jordan Falco, who does, surprisingly, and props to him, a lot of shows in Canada, does shows in Maine. Maine's a 6-hour drive.
Yeah. Depending on where in Maine, at least.
So you drive out there, you either stay or you come back. And again, I'm going out and having a 15-minute match where I'm going to be sweating balls. I'm not going to want to turn around and sit in a car and stew in that for 6 more hours.
Yeah, probably not. And the killer is, all right, cool. I drove 6 hours. That's probably at least 1 tank of gas each way. So let's $80 there.
Yeah, I'd say comfortably 100.
About 60 to $100 depending on your vehicle and
Yeah.
all that good stuff. Cool. Now you also have to pay for your own accommodations. I mean, if you're really going to go low key, you're going to split a real cheap, like Econo Lodge Motel 8 room with a couple people. So maybe you can get away with 30 to $50 there.
Right.
All right. So now we're at least at 100 to $150. Maybe you're going to get paid $200 for this show. Maybe 3.
If it's a bigger one.
Right.
I mean, I don't know the insides of.
Right. I don't know the
Some
pay
of
schemes
these.
of independent wrestling scene these days. Back in the early 90s, you're talking 25 to $50 for a show.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to Edge and Christian on their podcast talking about when they first started, and they're lucky to make $30 and think that it's the greatest thing ever for a show.
Right. So let's be generous and say it's $200 for a show for a performer these days.
You just made 50.
Yeah, you made $50 for a 6-hour drive, an evening's worth of work, and then a 6-hour drive back.
Yeah, so let's say for conservatively 18 hours of worth of work.
You made $50. You made about $3 to $4 an hour.
Yeah.
So
Going back to it, the fact that the cons want to somehow figure out how to do this healthcare thing would be huge for the wrestlers.
right, that at least takes one of these things off their plate. It takes a concern off their back of, hey, how much of this money I'm making am I going to suddenly lose because, well, in the process of doing my job, I blew my knee out.
Right. Now I need surgery, or now I need rehab. Now I can't wrestle and I can't make money.
Right. I'm not out there. Sure, I may still have my guaranteed contract and I'm getting my downside on that guarantee, but
And I may be pulling in a little bit of merchandise if you're lucky enough to have
if you're someone that's able to move a good bit of merchandise.
if you're lucky enough to have a pro wrestling tee shop, if you're lucky enough to be contracted to somebody who sells your stuff at the shows regardless,
Right.
you're making still a little bit. But for these independent guys, if you're hurt and you have to cancel shows, you're not making a living.
Right. Making $150,000 a year might sound like a whole heck of a lot of money, and it's definitely a really good chunk of change. But
that's going to go real quick when it's handed to you up front.
it's handed to you up front. You have to take your own taxes out of that money. You have to now pay for flying around the country, driving around the country, staying around the country, X number of shows per year.
Yeah.
And if you get hurt now, how much of a giant chunk is that going to take out of things?
Mm-hmm.
Like 150 grand can go real fast.
Yeah.
Especially when you have to pay every bit of your own medical bills. I mean, how medical bills for a decent injury could go 25 grand real fast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, tearing an ACL and doing the rehab and all of that, probably a cool 30.
And I mean, you can go and buy your own health insurance independently. You're probably going to be paying $500 to $1,000 a month.
Yep.
Being a professional wrestler. Like, who's going to insure you for that?
Right.
That's going to be ludicrous.
So, from what it sounds like, is the cons are going to be helping quite a bit. But it would be interesting to see how this company blossoms or falls flat on its face.
Right. And I think it's really important to note that it's Cody and the Bucks being executive vice presidents that are going to try to enable a lot of these things to really help the wrestlers become better taken care of. And the better taken care of the workers are, the better product they can give out.
Exactly. So in an article, Tony Khan actually stated that they're not going to run 340, 350 days a year. They're going to have a more relaxed schedule, which to me honestly sounds like they're going to, almost like Impact does it.
That's what I would think, is that they're probably going to be based out of Jacksonville.
They'll do a show. They'll do their weekly shows in Jacksonville.
Do a bunch of them, tape them all a bunch at a time.
Yep. And then turn around and, hey, we're having a pay-per-view. We're going to go to California. We're going to go to New York. We're going to go to Detroit. We're going to go back to Chicago.
Right. And if this thing really takes off, wonder if their big event every year is going to be held in the Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium. Gee.
Right? Like, shocking, especially in the off-season. Like, oh, I don't know, right now?
Yeah. Or like in the middle of, well, they're not in a dome, but they're in Florida. They don't need to be, but, maybe in June.
Right. Or like WWE has had WrestleManias, which are usually early April.
Yeah, early April.
They have them in Florida. You get 80-degree sunny weather. There's no football games going on in April.
Nope.
There's no, I mean, if you really want to do it in a baseball stadium, I guess I don't follow baseball, so you might be getting something happen. Spring training, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if the Jacksonville Jaguars, if their stadium's one of those ones that does multiple sports,
But even if they do, one Friday, one Saturday, one Sunday isn't going to kill them.
I'm sure they can figure it out.
I mean, if the NFL can figure out how to place 32 teams having 17 different games and figuring that whole shenanigans out, I think the cons can have their finger in it.
Right. I'm sure there's a logistics person on their staff that can make it happen.
But even if they do like a based TV show where they, like NXT even, where they do weekly tapings, the guys are going to be more well-rested. I say the guys. The locker room, the talent, are going to be more well-rested. They're going to have less strain on them. They're going to have better family lives. And you're giving them health insurance. And you're paying them more.
That's a pretty appealing offering there. And it's going to be really interesting to see what this does to the business. WWE is making more money now than they ever have in the past.
Yeah, and which is shocking because now they're not nearly at the height of their popularity.
Their ratings are dropping more than they ever have in the past. And they're in a position where they came out on TV and essentially announced that they know they've been sucking.
Right. You think this is going to be a kick in the pants?
This, handled correctly by the WWE, could only help them.
And per reports, blocking people from coming into your show with AEW merchandise is not the best way to start.
That shows they're not paying attention yet, and they haven't figured out how to handle it yet.
Right.
Cool. This may cost you a little bit more money to keep your people happy, to compete with what these other offers are. Look what that did to the Attitude Era.
Right.
Look what being forced to compete does to the business. It's better.
It can only make one or two products better.
You're going to get better results in this business when you have competition. You get better results in any industry when you have competition. Monopolies don't help business. Monopolies don't help the consumers.
Right.
They only help the business. That's the monopoly.
And if you're looking at it now, look at the roster that WWE has. They have some of the, if not the best talent in wrestling.
It's very easy to say they have the most talented roster athletically that they've ever had, and their ratings are doing worse than they've ever done.
Which makes zero sense.
How do you let that happen? It's because you've become complacent, and their intentional strategy is to try to talent starve the rest of the competition.
Right.
Because there hasn't been a legitimate contender.
Pull everybody from everywhere, give them a contract, let them sit and do nothing, a.k.a. Zack Ryder.
They're essentially, this is going to be a weird way to reference this, but back in the old Raw vs. SmackDown video games, when you could be the GM of either show, the best way to really win that GM mode was to take a wrestler, make them essentially a jobber on your show, put them in all of these big matches, have them lose every match, absolutely tank their stats, but keep putting them on TV so they become valuable, then release them as a free agent, and basically force the other brand to pick up this tainted competitor. You taint the well. You take all of this talent, you waste it, and make them worthless.
Yeah.
But still demand a big salary, because who wants to take a $3 million pay cut?
Right. And WWE, over the last 10, 20 years, has been pretty good at doing that. They've been killing competition left and right. I mean, at one point, Impact Wrestling was on the verge of hitting a different level.
Yeah.
WWE stopped it. ROH has never gotten any farther than where they are right now. Which, granted, ROH is probably at its peak since they've had this better working relationship with New Japan.
Well, let's go to New Japan. WWE's been doing New Japan wrong by basically committing contract interference. I don't know the actual legal name for it, but basically they're starting to negotiate with New Japan guys
while they're
under contract,
yeah.
which is illegal, under the basic premise of, all right, you're in Japan, we're in the U.S., come on over and file a lawsuit against us. It'll cost you a ton of money. It's a giant hassle. Prove that we did it.
Yeah, and apparently the way that Japanese overseas laws work with stuff like that, it would cost, for one lawsuit, I remember reading somewhere, it would cost New Japan somewhere in the $10 to $20 million range just to file it.
And they're not going to get nearly that amount. It would take... WWE can bleed them dry in court, essentially.
Right. It's not worth it for them to do it. However, the bigger difference being the people in New Japan are relatively dedicated to New Japan.
Right.
So, granted, yes, they won't drop their contract and immediately jump ship, but they'll at least wait and be like, hey, they're talking to me, I'm letting you know now.
Right. But what could have happened to New Japan if AJ Styles, Shinsuke Nakamura, Gallows, and Anderson weren't cut right out from under them.
Finn Balor.
Finn.
Yeah, I mean, you have those group of guys plus them working with the crop that's in there now. When the Bucks were there, Cody was there, Kenny, Tanahashi, Naito. Like they could have easily been when they decided to show up in America starting this US title tournament and all that, they could have been something big.
They could have been a much bigger presence than they have been.
Granted, they have a presence, which is something WWE doesn't want.
Right. It's just how much bigger could that have been?
Right.
Definitely could have been bigger. So I think that's probably about all we have on AEW for the moment. It's going to be very interesting to see if it, as the Bucks have said, changes the business.
Yeah.
That's what they've been out to do, and it's
Quote,
hard to say that they're not giving that a good shot.
"Quote unquote, change the world."
Yeah.
They're changing the wrestling world.
If it improves conditions and makes this a place where people want to go work instead of I'm kind of reluctantly going here for a giant paycheck.
Right.
That could be huge.
Yeah.
All right. So let's transition into what does AEW existing now mean for Impact?
Honestly, I think AEW showing up right off the bat. Now we're going to look at just American companies, American-based companies. We're going to leave New Japan out of this for argument's sake.
Yeah, we'll come back to them at the very end here.
AEW showing up, I think, by default, they automatically move into the second place.
I think as far as American companies go, I think you're right. They move into the number 2 spot pretty solidly.
And this is even before we have a full roster, before we have a TV deal. Impact moves into a distant 4th.
Impact definitely is hurt by this because a lot of the talent that Impact wants to get is going to be drawn to AEW.
Right. Like, honestly, how much longer do you think Johnny Impact, Johnny Mundo, Johnny Nitro, John Morrison is going to stay in Impact Wrestling when you have the likes of AEW showing up?
He's definitely going to get pulled. He's a guy that's been bouncing around from company to company to company anyways lately, between the Mexico
Lucha Underground,
AAA. And AAA.
Moving to Impact back when it was Global Force Wrestling.
Right.
I mean, you have guys like that. You have guys like Pentagon and Phoenix.
Those guys, having been on All In, I think are going to be a big target for AEW to get once they're able to get them from Impact. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't go.
Right. If they're not going to WWE.
Impact has been turning themselves around, for sure.
It's gotten a lot better, and it seems like they're moving in a better direction with Don Callis and Bill DeMott at the helm of everything.
Not Bill DeMott.
Yeah. He's one of the other guys.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Huh. All right.
That's what I said. It's funny that they're moving in the direction that they are because it doesn't seem like those two could do that.
I think it's a case of too little, too late.
Definitely.
And I think AEW coming into existence really hurts them because it makes it that much more difficult now to get a good TV deal for them.
They've already bounced around between, 4 different networks in the last 2 years?
Right, and I think Anthem owns one of those. I think they own the network they're on now, Pursuit.
Correct.
So that might be their ceiling now.
Yeah.
I've never heard of the Pursuit channel.
Neither have I.
I don't even know if I could ever get that on my local cable company if I wanted to.
I think the only plus side that Impact has is that they're also doing this on Twitch now, like House of Hardcore was.
That is a definite possibility. I don't think that will ever be enough to elevate them further than... They can probably compete with ROH now because I think ROH is going to have a lot of these same issues.
Right. But again, what's at this point stopping AEW from running on Twitch?
Exactly. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So Impact, solid fourth place because they can't poach talent from WWE. They weren't poaching talent before. How are they going to do it now with two companies that are more enticing than what they are?
Exactly. They had a good working relationship with AAA, but I don't think they're going much further than this now.
No. Moving on.
At very best, I think the future holds for Impact fighting for third.
Yeah. And they're going to have an uphill climb against ROH, who is, I think, in the third slot.
Right. So, yeah, let's go to ROH now. Previously, the kind of indie darling federation.
Yeah.
More so than Impact had like this weird, we're big league, but we have absolutely nothing to really back that up with.
Yeah.
Feel to it. ROH always kind of felt more indie darling-ish.
Yeah, I'd say so. But now ROH has lost Cody. They've lost the Bucks. They've lost Hangman. They have Marty.
They lost SCU.
Yeah. They lost any chance of getting Joey Janela or MJF. I don't foresee anybody from New Japan going to ROH because I don't know how that working relationship is going to end up.
So it still exists, which probably going to be in contention.
For how long?
Exactly. So right now, ROH really has that New Japan connection going for them. They have Jeff Cobb. He's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
They have Jay Lethal still. That's
Yeah.
not nothing. But, again, much like Impact.
What's going to stop them from going to AEW?
Exactly. They have that same problem that Impact has where new talent now has a much more lucrative, much more friendly, quote unquote, as far as work schedule benefits things go.
Well, like even Hangman said in his rally speech, he said, today was my favorite first day of work ever because I didn't feel like I had some massive conglomerate standing over me telling me how to do my job.
Right. You don't have the politics that you're going to end up with at ROH, at Impact, at WWE.
What would make somebody want to walk into... Because Hangman was contracted through ROH. What would make somebody want to walk into that, hearing him say something like that?
Right. What entices anyone to go to Impact or ROH instead of AEW, assuming AEW gets some manner of TV or distribution at some point?
Right. Like, there's no point.
So ROH and Impact are now almost literally at the mercy of who does AEW or WWE sign.
Right. Or AEW ran out of Tony Khan's $100 million. What do we do now?
Right. I don't think that's going to be an issue for them.
Nope.
And if it does, then that whole thing's falling apart anyways, and
I mean,
it's a whole nother conversation.
Considering Shad Khan is worth like $5.6 billion, I think he has a little bit to spare. But that's just me. Still kind of reeling it back to ROH. They have some good talent. They really do.
They definitely do.
They just signed Bandito, who was on All In.
That's definitely not nothing.
For being a relative unknown, dude's impressive.
Very much so. So they definitely have talent. They're definitely not like, that's it, they're dead by any means.
They're not hurting for people like Impact is.
They're now fighting to stay in third instead of kind of being, honestly, the comfortably second spot in the U.S.
Yeah, ROH was definitely number 2 in the U.S. for a good while.
Yeah.
They've lost that handily.
Yeah. They're now definitely a far third. Instead of now being the place for non-WWE guys to go, they're now kind of, like I said, at the mercy of, can this guy go to AEW? Yes. Well, we're kind of screwed then. Does AEW not want them? Oh, okay. Well, we're getting the cast-offs, which is not intended to slight the talent whatsoever by calling them a cast-off, but they were unable to work with AEW, presumably.
Right. So let's jump over to now finishing it off with New Japan. Not a big presence in the U.S. They're getting there.
Trying to be, but they're they're more a presence because of who they're working with in the U.S. typically than their own merits.
Right. I would say most, from personal experience, the whole reason I started watching New Japan was Cody, was the Bucks,
Was the Bullet Club
Bullet Club, Kenny.
more the elite than the Bullet Club at that?
Right. Those were the guys that originally drew me over there. Granted, now I'm still going to watch them because of Naito, Tanahashi, Okada, Evil, Sonata.
Yeah,
I mean, any of their homegrown talent. I'm going to
right.
still watch.
Their
because
product
of
is
them.
solid enough on its own that they don't need the elite to carry their product by any means.
Correct. However, the name recognition that they now do not have because of the pool of people that they have is going to make their stepping into the United States a little bit harder.
So this comes in now. The elephant in the room comes in here. Kenny Omega. What happens in the next few weeks surrounding Kenny Omega is going to be very interesting.
To put it into perspective for those of you who don't know who Kenny Omega is or don't know what a big deal this is, think of LeBron James sitting down. Nobody knows where he's going, and then he finally says, I'm going to the Miami Heat. Or, where's he going after he returned to Cleveland? I'm going to the Lakers. It's a big deal. Knowing where Kenny Omega is going to end up, because as of this point, 90% certain it's not WWE.
I don't know if I'm that certain that's not WWE, but I would bet heavily that it's not WWE.
Yeah, it's one of those where if I was a betting man, I would put a lot of money on not being WWE.
And if it's not WWE, wherever he does go, New Japan wants in on that.
Right.
He carries enough cachet that an entire company will now figure out how to do business with some new partner just so he can remain on their shows.
Because Kenny Omega, he's one of those crossover stars. People know him in the United States. He's assimilated himself into the Japanese culture. The guy speaks fluent Japanese.
Right.
Like, and he puts on phenomenal matches and can tell a story. The fact that somebody wants to do business with him so badly that they may toss out their working relationship with ROH.
Yeah, New Japan could essentially give ROH the finger and decide to start doing business with AEW purely because of Kenny. Kenny's just the kind of person that fans get invested in very heavily because he's that good of a storyteller. He's that athletic. He's that entertaining.
But he's
that kind of person.
He's also a good guy. Like, I've never heard a bad story about somebody meeting Kenny Omega.
Yeah.
I mean, just like with Cody. We met him.
Yup.
Him and Brandy, possibly two of the nicest quote-unquote celebrities I've ever met.
It really felt like they wanted to be there and they wanted to interact with the fans rather than they have to be here, we have to interact with the fans.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that Cody snags my phone from me and goes, here, let me take the selfie, and then does a goofy pose as he takes it. Like, come on. Like, if somebody who didn't want to be there or somebody who didn't want to do that kind of stuff for the fans, he would have signed the paper or signed the picture, handed it to me, and said, get lost.
Yeah, exactly. There was just so many little things they did that showed that's where they wanted to be instead of that's where they had to be, that it's really tough to kind of almost put it into words.
Right. So if you have that kind of following as a fan or as a wrestler with the fans, that a company like New Japan, one of the biggest companies in Japan, wants to solely do business with you. And I mean, the Chris Jericho thing probably entices the deal a little bit more because they've said they want to do business with Jericho.
Jericho has done great things for their visibility.
How can you go wrong? if Kenny ends up with AEW, it's almost a lock that New Japan has a working relationship with
Yeah,
them.
it's like, okay, we get Cody, the Bucks, Hangman, Kenny, and Jericho all back if we do business with you, as opposed to we get Jeff Cobb and the Best Friends.
Yeah.
That's not with absolutely no disrespect intended towards anyone, that's not a difficult decision to make.
Right. I mean, granted, in the future, we could be saying something different about Jeff Cobb. We could be saying something different about Jay Lethal.
Sure.
Who knows? But as of right now, today, if I'm a if I'm booking the New Japan shows, and somebody comes to me and says, "Do you want to put Kenny Omega or Jay Lethal on a show?
That is no decision at all.
You want to put the Bucks or the Briscoes on a show?"
Such an easy decision to make.
Like why would I even consider the latter?
Yeah, it's like Cody or Jeff Cobb. I could see an argument for Jeff Cobb over Cody,
Right.
but
Kenny or Jeff Cobb.
no decision.
Right.
Like Kenny or Kenny versus all of them.
Right. Then you flip it and say, do you want to put Chris Jericho on a show or the entire ROH roster?
Exactly. These are not difficult decisions based on the value these people bring in.
Right.
Again, no disrespect whatsoever to all the ROH talent. They're just unfortunately not at the same level as Jericho and Kenny Omega.
Which they could be
They could.
if they went to All Elite Wrestling.
Maybe. All right, so brings us to WWE. What do we see happening there this year?
Them stepping their game up, hopefully.
One really has to hope.
Putting on a decent WrestleMania for the first time in 5 years.
I think whatever happens in 2 weeks at Royal Rumble, whatever happens there is going to speak very loudly about the future of this company.
Yeah. If they keep Brock around, doing his on-again, off-again relationship with the TV screen.
I could see them keeping Brock just until Mania, but if he's kept any more than that, I'm scared.
If Brock does not lose the title at Mania, AEW is going to give WWE a run for their money. I will say it now.
So, right now, the two things that I could picture going on at Raw for WrestleMania is Brock versus Seth for the title or Braun versus Drew. Brock versus Seth is playing it safe, and I don't know if that's a bright move right now. Braun versus Drew may also not be a bright move because I don't think that's as iconic of a match for WrestleMania because they've screwed up both of those guys so far. But it would be a step in the right direction of go out there, get over, get rewarded.
So, here's what I would have to say about the flip side. Let's look at the WWE title. The only thing that I could see happening, aside from a superstar shakeup, would be either Daniel Bryan versus either Almas or Mustafa Ali at WrestleMania, or AJ Styles versus one of those two guys at WrestleMania.
What if we did AJ versus Joe at Mania? That plausible?
It's plausible, but not iconic.
Sadly, at this point, it's not because they've done that match 4 times now.
Right. It wouldn't even be AJ versus Daniel Bryan because we got that on a freaking SmackDown.
Right. I agree that match is no longer an iconic WrestleMania match. They burned it.
You couldn't even do Shinsuke versus AJ.
Nope, burned that last year.
Granted,
And burned Shinsuke too much.
Granted, Shinsuke versus DB might be something a little different, but we got that on SmackDown 1000.
Yeah, and I also just don't think that's iconic enough anymore. They've burned Shinsuke too much.
At this point, you need either a shakeup where it's AJ versus Finn, Shinsuke versus Finn, DB versus Finn. In case you haven't noticed, I'm saying Finn Balor needs to go to SmackDown.
Yeah.
You need to pull Aleister Black up. You need to pull Tommaso Ciampa up. You give me AJ Styles versus Velveteen Dream at WrestleMania, and I'll forever be a WWE fan.
Give me DB versus Gargano or Ciampa.
Or a triple threat match.
They'll never... Triple threats at Mania don't work out well.
That's true.
No, can't do that. Anyways, with the Fox deal and AEW and the worst ratings ever. So, let me rephrase that a little bit. With the Fox deal on the horizon and AEW and the worst ratings ever chasing them, WWE's next moves are very critical.
They need to pull their pants up, tighten the belt, and lean headfirst into whatever they're going to do.
They need to make some strong decisions that are not centered around
two people.
What the owners of the company think.
They need to listen to the fans, but they don't need to listen to the fans the way that they were trying to a couple weeks ago.
If we don't have Becky Lynch in the main event of Mania,
if Becky Lynch doesn't tap out Ronda Rousey to end WrestleMania,
we have a problem.
Something's wrong.
We have a problem. That's what people want to see right now. If they somehow, between now and April, in the next 3 months, if they somehow don't let that happen as much as everyone wants it right now, we have a big, big problem on our hands.
Yep.
People want that, not even those women, that woman to main event WrestleMania.
It doesn't matter who she's facing at this point. She could face Charlotte. She could face Bayley. She could face Sasha.
They want to see Becky take down Ronda because they know if that happens, that means the company's still listening. That means there's
hope.
There's hope. That's what that match is right now.
If that doesn't happen,
we have a big ass problem.
If that doesn't happen, I could see. I'm not saying WWE's going to sink.
They're too big right now. That the term "too big to fail" definitely applies to them.
I could see a very, very big flock of talent pack up and leave.
I could definitely start seeing a talent exodus that we haven't seen since 1996.
Yeah. Could you imagine if Seth leaves, Daniel Bryan leaves, AJ leaves, Becky leaves? Just those 4 people.
That would be really detrimental to that company.
Then you toss in some of the people who are good but aren't getting a chance. Could you imagine if the Bar leaves?
Let's start with those 4 people. Yes, they could end up bleeding the whole company dry, but those 4 people alone,
Seth, AJ, DB, and Becky,
they're going to bring the hardcore fans. They're going to bring the people that bring other people in. They're going to be the people that are spending money on belts, on a lot of merch.
Yeah. Those 4 people could single-handedly move AEW into a solid second, into chasing for number 1.
Very much so. Especially, again, a lot of this is going to depend on AEW's distribution method. But it may even, if Twitch is a viable platform for this, if YouTube is a viable platform for this,
So they do a simulcast with Being the Elite on YouTube, and whatever TV deal they have. Hell, they get a TV deal and it shows up a day later on Hulu? Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah. I'm about to say, TV doesn't necessarily mean anything that much anymore.
No.
Cool. WWE Network, $9.99. Cool. We're on Twitch. It's free.
Or, hey, you know what? We're going to put it on TV. You can't see it? That's fine. You can't make it at the time that it's on TV? That's fine. Wait till the end of their quote-unquote season. Let's put all of them on Netflix.
Yeah.
How many people are on Netflix? How many people are going to scroll by and be like, oh, what's this? Watch an episode and, oh, okay, let's keep watching this.
I don't know. Do you think Netflix is interested in wrestling with Glow doing really well for them?
And they have Lucha Underground on there.
Sure do.
Why not?
It's content distribution is so much different than it was in the mid to late 90s. It's
granted, still, if you don't have a TV deal, you're not going to hit the next level.
It will be very difficult. But let's not forget, this whole thing happened because of their YouTube show.
Fair point.
All right. Is that a show?
I think that's a show.
All right. Appreciate everyone sitting through this and listening to us pontificate on what two nobodies think's going to happen in the next year of wrestling.
That was like a $20 word.
That's what I bring to the table.
So let us know what you think, because I'd love to hear.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen to the wrestling business in 2019? Something's going to happen. Something big is going to happen.
Yeah.
There's either going to be a new big competitor or a massive flop in the water.
Yeah.
Either way, it's going to be something to see.
All right. So you can hear us at iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music.
We are on Facebook at Wrestling History Podcast.
No, This Week in Wrestling History.
This Week in Wrestling History. You can contact us through Gmail at WrestlingHistoryPodcast at gmail.com.
There you go. You can get to us at Twitter at TWI.
WH.
Yes, I always lose that. Hopefully soon I can get us up and running on YouTube.
Yep. Twitter, I think, is WrestleHistPod.
Yeah.
All right. That's all the plugs we got for this week, I think.
We do have our first actual guest is going to be on
next week.
We're going
to be covering Royal Rumble from 1991?
Two.
Two.
And then after that, we're going to have another guest who, get this, actually works in the business.
Oh, we finally did good.
We got him. It's my get.
Your get, yep.
Both of them are my get.
Well, all right. I don't know people. That's your job. Your job is gets.
So
I bring the big words. You bring the guests.
Okay. I guess that works. All right. I guess that's it.
We're history.